Have you ever had someone tell you that you need to get your head in the game or yourself in the zone? Today, the topic is psychology, and we're talking all about the zone, or in other words, the IZOF, the individual zone of optimal functioning. The first top point is psychological considerations to improve your zone or your IZOF. So what actually is your individual zone of optimal function? This occurs when an individual or athlete performs at their best ability and they are able to situate their emotions in bandwidth which are considered appropriate for them, which means they obtain optimal vigor, which is your ability to be in good health and performance. Now, there are multiple factors that can affect your zone of optimal performance. The first one is your motivation. The first type of motivation is intrinsic motivation or internal motivation. This is when an athlete is driven by their inside emotions, so they actually enjoy the sport for inherent joy or performance or pleasure. The second type of motivation is external or extrinsic motivation. This is when an athlete partakes in activity or sport for the external rewards. So for example, for winning a tournament or winning a trophy, it is the outside part, not to do with your emotions. The next consideration is self-confidence. Self-confidence is one's expectations about success and how their ability aligns with that and how confident they feel about achieving that goal. The more confident you are, you tend to become less anxious. The next consideration that affects the zone is stress. Stress is a process in which there is a substantial imbalance between one's demands and response capabilities. McGrath stated that there are 4 areas of stress. The first one is the environmental demand. The second one is the perception of the environmental demand. And the third one is the stress response. And the fourth one is the behavioral consequence. Now, there are 2 ways of coping with stress or coping mechanisms. The first one is problem-focused coping, which involves methods to manage the issue that is occurring. And the second one is emotion-focused coping, which involves the regulation of emotions to deal with that problem. The next consideration that affects your zone is your concentration or attention levels and the control you have over that. Attentional focus can vary according to whether it is narrow or broad or internal or external. Nidiffer's model demonstrates the ability to focus on relevant cues in the environment. So for example, if you're playing a game of netball, your internal focus should be on your player or the ball, but external stuff could include the environment around you, so the crowd. Again, your narrow focus would be the ball or your position or your feet, and then a broader focus could be your player down the other end. So it's all to do with your focus and your ability to multitask between those different areas. Arousal regulation is another consideration that affects your zone of optimal functioning, and it refers to the heightened psychological and physical activation of your body and mind. It can stem from positive or negative events, and it relates closely to anxiety, which is a negative emotional state characterized by nervousness, worry, and apprehension. There are 2 types of anxiety: cognitive anxiety, which is to do with your brain and how you feel, and somatic anxiety, which is to do with your body and your muscles and the arousal of the body. Trait anxiety is a behavioral deposition, meaning it is constant. However, state anxiety is an emotional response to a change in mood to particular situations. So someone could have anxiety, which is consistent, or they could just feel a bit anxious before running a 100-meter race. So when you get that butterflies in your stomach or you feel like you're going to vomit. Now we are moving on to factors that influence motivation, arousal, and stress. This includes one's age, one's ability, one's performance level, one's gender, and how complicated a skill is. To better understand this, we are going to use the inverted U hypothesis, which indicates the optimal performance of an athlete's experience depending on their arousal level. It states that if an athlete is under-aroused, they may not perform at their best, but also states that if they are over-aroused, they may also underperform. So the U would look like this. If they're in the middle, that is their peak. So they're just right aroused, not too much and not too little. So an example of athletes, depending on their age, gender, and skill capability, is when you're teaching little kids around the age of 5 how to kick a soccer ball. They are already naturally over-aroused. So it is important you keep them under aroused, so you lower their arousal from over aroused to the optimal middle arousal to allow them to learn that skill at their best optimal performance. This could include by getting them to calm their breaths, breathe in and out, sit silently and listen, and to add rules in to regulate the behavior. On the other side, you might have older kids who are quite shy and not very motivated to perform a certain skill, like let's say in sport they're learning volleyball. Maybe to increase their arousal, particularly in girls, you can put on some music that they like and put them with their friends, and all of a sudden they've gone from under aroused to their optimal arousal to allow them to concentrate and improve and learn more skills. Depending on an athlete's skill ability will determine how aroused the environment can be around them. So elite athletes are able to control their arousal and put it into their optimal level when they're playing in grand finals where there's 60, 80,000 people in the crowds cheering and booing them. So you would not find that ability in a year one student compared to, let's say, an elite athlete in the same environment. So this is all to do with experience, age, level, and arousal. Finally, our third syllabus dot point for the day is goal setting. Goal setting can be quite broad, so it's important we narrow it down to make your goal more achievable in the long run. So to use this, we use the acronym SMARTS or SMARTS goals. So let's use the example of wanting to run a marathon. So a goal with no use of the acronym SMARTS would just be, I would like to run a marathon. Now we're going to change this goal using the acronym SMARTS. So the first part is the S, which stands for specific. So you need to be specific. What is this goal? Where is it going to take place and when? So I'm going to run the Adelaide Marathon in October next year. Then we move on to M, which is measurable. So how are you going to measure whether you've achieved this goal or not? You might go run it and not finish. So how are you going to set a time? Are you going to set a pace? Are you going to say you just completed? How are you going to measure that you've achieved that goal? The next one is it attainable? Are you actually a runner or have you never run in your whole entire life? So will you be able to achieve that goal in a month, maybe 6 months, or probably a year or two? So don't be like, I'm going to run a marathon next week and you've never run before. It needs to be specific, measurable, and attainable. The next one is realistic. So is it realistic? Do you work a full-time job with 4 kids and you already have no spare time? Running a marathon takes roughly 4 hours depending on how good you are. So you're going to need to dedicate at least a few hours a week to training. Is it realistic? Maybe aiming for a 10-kilometer run first would be more realistic than a marathon. And finally, S. Is it self-determined? Are you doing this to prove someone wrong or to prove to your friends that you're better than them? Or are you doing it because you genuinely enjoy running and you genuinely want to push yourself to a new challenge? So now we've used SMARTS, we've changed our goal from I want to run a marathon to I would like to complete a marathon in under 4 hours next year at the Adelaide Marathon Running Festival in October, and I will do this by training 3 times a week for 1 hour after work. So there you go. That is how you set a better goal that is more specific than a broad goal. And finally, there are 3 types of goals that one can set. The first one is performance goals, which refers to general statements of intent. So how you want to perform. I just want to run this marathon and run the whole way without walking. That is a performance goal and it is not measurable. The second type of goal is an outcome goal. So you're focusing on attaining a specific standard and it is measurable. So for example, that is saying, when I run this marathon, I want to run sub 4 hours. That is an outcome goal. And thirdly, the third type of goal is a process goal. So your goal is to enjoy the journey. I just want to train every week and let myself enjoy this journey, and whatever happens at the marathon doesn't matter because you made it. So those are the 3 different types of goals. I hope you learned something new and I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.